Today, paint comes in clean tubes, factory made, safe, predictable. You squeeze, you paint, and you never ask where the color came from. But did you know that for most of history, most pigments were made from bodies? Not metaphors, not symbolism, actual bodies. Painters weren't just artists, they were collectors, processors, and sometimes destroyers. This is the story of color, before it was safe. For most of human history, paint didn't exist as a product. There were no factories, no standardized colors, no safety labels. If you wanted color, you had to make it. Artists weren't just painters, they were chemists and suppliers. Every color came from something real, something physical, something you could harvest. Red didn't mean red, it meant insects, crushed by the thousands. Purple meant rotting sea creatures. Black often meant ashes. Color was expensive, color was unstable, and color was often violent to obtain. A single painting could represent months of harvesting, processing, and destruction. And yet, artists kept doing it. Because color meant meaning, it meant power, it meant status. It wasn't until the 19th century that synthetic pigments changed everything. Before that, every color had a cost, and some colors demanded more than others. Sometimes, that cost was human. Today we are exploring crazy ways some pigments were made before the invention of the paint as we know today. But before that, we need to talk about what held them together. On their own, pigments are useless. They're just expensive dust. For most of history, artists had two main choices. The oldest and most common binder was tempera, with some examples dating back to 3,400 to 2,700 BCE. There are a few different types of tempera. They could make it with milk, plant gum, shrimp, eel, cornstarch, wax. The one using chicken egg was the most popular. It's made by mixing pigment with chicken egg yolk, sometimes diluted with water. It dries fast, like extremely fast, which means no blending, no soft transitions. Every stroke is a permanent commitment. That's why medieval paintings look, well, medieval. Tempera is stable, sure, but it's brittle. It hates thickness. If you paint too thick, it cracks. This matters because tempera traps whatever you mix into it. Whatever the pigment is, tempera freezes it in place. It makes it flat, precise, and graphic. Oil painting changed that relationship. The earliest known use of oil as a painting binder did not happen in Europe. In the Bamiyan caves, in what is now Afghanistan, artists were mixing pigments with drying oils as early as the 7th century AD. This isn't speculation. Laboratory analysis confirmed the presence of drying oils used as binders in these murals. Oil dries slowly. That single difference changed everything. It allows blending, transparency, depth. It allows thickness, correction, time. You can finally change your mind 3 days later. It's the undo button of the Renaissance. It's in the 15th century that oil painting became dominant in Europe. Contrary to popular beliefs, artists like Jan van Eyck didn't invent oil painting. They just refined it. Oil didn't just change how artists painted, it changed how pigments behaved. It made organic materials richer, darker, more alive. And now that you know what held the color together, let's look at the terrifying things that color was actually made of. Red, the color of the devil, the color of blood, the color of violence. It's a color so violent that humanity found some really metal ways to create it. First up, lac dye. Meet the Caria laca. It's a scale insect found in South Asia that spends its life turning tree branches into a hardened show of resin and eggs. They feed, reproduce. When the time was right, the branches were chopped. Insects, eggs, resin, all together. The mass was heated, crushed, filtered. What came out wasn't just color, it was thousands of bodies dissolved into dye. It produced deep, rich reds like crimson, burgundy, and purples. Lac dye pigment has been used for thousands of years, with references in ancient Indian Vedic texts, 1500 to 500 BCE, and evidence of its use in ancient Greek art. It was used in manuscripts, textiles, early paintings. One batch of dye could contain tens of thousands of insects. Like many organic dyes, lac wasn't stable. It faded, shifted, changed with time. Artists don't use lac much anymore, but you do. It's in your cosmetics, it's in your food. You're literally wearing and eating ancient insect history. Bon appetit! Then there's kermes. It came from insects called kermes. But we only wanted the females, and only at one specific horrific moment, when they were bursting with eggs. They were collected by hand, we dried them, we crushed them. We turned motherhood into a blood-like red for sacred imagery and royal power. Expensive? Yes. Slow? Absolutely. But if you wanted to look like a god, you needed the kermes. It has been used for millennia, with evidence of its use in textiles dating back to the Middle Bronze Age, around 1767 to 1954 BCE, in the Judean desert, making it one of the oldest known red dyes. Then came the cochineal. You know those white, fuzzy bugs on your plants that you try to kill? Those are a gold mine. Cochineal pigment has been used for over 2,000 years by indigenous peoples in the Americas for textiles, art, and medicine, with evidence suggesting usage by Mesoamerican civilizations as early as 2000 BCE. At first glance, they don't look like much. Then they're killed by heat or steam, dried, crushed, reduced to powder. What comes out is one of the strongest natural reds ever discovered. Cochineal changed painting. It was brighter than kermes, more stable, and easier to produce. But the scale was unprecedented. Tens of thousands of insects for a single batch. Entire colonial economies were built on insect death. Not hidden, not symbolic, systematic. And just like lac, it's still everywhere. In your food, your medicine, your face cream. The red harvest never really stopped. Hi there, it's Bob from the future. Or the past? Anyways, I'm editing right now, and I thought I'd do a quick segment on blood pigments. See, blood has been used as a pigment for thousands of years, but not for decoration. It was ritual, war markings, offerings, symbolic power. But as paint, it's unreliable. It starts bright red, then quickly turns dark brown, because blood doesn't stay alive. It oxidizes, it dies. And that makes it a terrible pigment. The interesting thing about it is that it wasn't used by artists in the past. It's used by artists today. That being performance artists, sculptors, painters, not for color, but for meaning. Because no matter how advanced paint gets, nothing hits harder than something that was once alive. So yeah, subscribe for more. Before red ruled the world, purple ruled empires. But the path to royalty wasn't paved with gold. It was paved with rotting snails. Tyrian purple came from sea snails, very specific ones, murex snails. Inside each snail was a tiny gland, almost colorless at first. Thousands of snails were crushed for this, sometimes more, for a single garment. The liquid was left to rot. Exposed to sunlight, the color slowly emerged, yellow, green, then finally, purple. The smell was so unbearable, so foul, that by law, the dye had to be made far outside the city limits. The color was reserved for power. In Rome, wearing Tyrian purple could be illegal. This wasn't fashion, it was authority. For centuries, entire coastlines were stripped for this color. Today, purple comes from chemistry. In 1856, William Henry Perkin wasn't trying to make color. He was trying to cure malaria. He failed. But when he cleaned his experiment, the glass turned purple. Bright, synthetic, impossible, mauveine. No shells, no decay, no thousands of deaths for a single gram. Just chemistry. And overnight, purple stopped being rare and started being manufactured. This color lived. It had a name, and it was sold in paint tubes. Mummy brown was made from human remains. Embalmed bodies, dried, ground, mixed with oil. The result was a soft, transparent brown, perfect for shadows, perfect for skin tones, perfect for making things feel alive. Which is technically true, considering there's literally someone in there. For centuries, the human cadaver was a legal business, not as art, not as relics, but as material. powdered human tissue was used as medicine, as pigment, as commodity. Basically, if you had a problem, the solution was usually eat a dead Egyptian. To modernize, the idea sounds insane, but people didn't consume mummies as a joke. For centuries, Europeans believed that mummified bodies contained healing power. Part of this came from a misunderstanding. The word mumia originally referred to a medicinal bitumen, not a human body. Over time, that meaning shifted, and preserved Egyptian bodies became the substitute. Mummy powder was prescribed for pain, bleeding, and illness. It was sold by apothecaries, recommended by doctors. This wasn't fringe medicine. It was normal practice for hundreds of years. And once human bodies were accepted as medicine, turning them into paint didn't feel like a big step. Now, mummy brown didn't absolutely involve Egyptian mummies every time. At a certain point, the demand was so high that they started to use other type of preserved bodies, such as animals and criminals. An artist even used the preserved heart of a king. When Louis XIV died in 1715, his body followed royal tradition. The heart was removed, preserved, and stored separately. Enter the revolution. Churches are looted, relics are sold. Royal remains are scattered like second-hand merch. Then, in the early 19th century, the artist Alexandre Paul de Saint-Martin is said to have acquired preserved royal hearts from a person that stole them during the French Revolution. According to historical accounts and modern analysis, part of the preserved heart of Louis XIV was reduced into pigment and can be found into this paint. Vue de Caen. Look closely at these shadows. Yeah, that's mummy brown. Scientific examination of its brown pigments detected human proteins, consistent with preserved heart tissue. This doesn't tell us why the material was used, only that it was. A king, reduced to a shade of brown to paint a landscape in Normandy. The ultimate recycling. Mummy brown didn't disappear because it was a bad pigment. Artists liked it. And for a long time, many painters didn't fully understand what it actually was. Mumia was a vague term. If you watched my first video, I talked about Edward Burne-Jones and a few other artists burying their tubes of mummy brown like a small funeral. There was no ban, no law, no official announcement. By the late 19th century, chemistry offered better options. It's more ethical. It's safer. We don't grind up our ancestors to finish a portrait anymore. Sepia feels familiar, calm, old. We associate it with sketches, with studies, with the past. It came from an organ. Sepia was made from the ink sac of cuttlefish. Humans have been harvesting this organ for writing and art since antiquity. The sac was extracted, the ink collected, and then processed into a pigment that wasn't violent in color. It was subtle, transparent, perfect for shadows and lines. The greats loved it. Da Vinci, Rembrandt, they used sepia because it felt alive, warm, almost human in its tone. But sepia was fragile. It was a biological byproduct after all. It faded, it shifted, it aged faster than the paper it was on. Today, sepia is purely synthetic. Same color, no organs required. Indian yellow was beautiful, transparent, luminous. It made light look alive, unlike any other yellow available at the time. In the 19th century, artists couldn't get enough of it. If you wanted that golden hour glow, this was your only choice. But this glow didn't come from the earth. It came from a bladder. Indian yellow was produced from the urine of cows. But not just any cows, and definitely not a happy farm. These animals were kept on a brutal, restricted diet. Mango leaves. Almost nothing else. The diet was a death sentence. The cows suffered from extreme malnutrition, weakness, and constant pain. Their urine was collected daily, heated, reduced, and dried into solid, stinking balls of pigment. Of course. The process worked. Historical sources describe it as having a disagreeable odor. Not so much on the finished painting, but during production. Concentrated organic waste produces ammonia-like smells. When the public finally realized that this beautiful light was powered by animal torture, the process was banned. By the early 20th century, the original Indian yellow was gone. Today, Indian yellow no longer exists. It's been replaced by synthetic pigments. a beautiful color, made possible only through suffering. Black, the absence of light. But in the world of art, you can't just paint nothingness, you have to build it. Bone black wasn't about killing. To make it, you take bones, leftovers from the butcher, scraps from the table, and you bake them in a sealed container. No flames, no ash, just pure carbonization. What survives fire becomes color. It's one of the oldest pigments ever used by humans. Older than agriculture, older than writing, and older than organized religion. At least 40,000 years ago, during the Upper Paleolithic, humans were already burning animal bones to make black pigment. It produced a deep, soft black. Less shiny than charcoal, warmer, heavier. Artists such as Rembrandt, Vermeer, Manet, and Picasso used bone black in their palettes, mostly for shadows, for night, for death. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Sometimes it came from animal bones, sometimes from ivory, teeth, tusks, remains. Crazy enough, with what we have learned from the previous pigments, there is no historical evidence from legit sources that proves human bones has ever been used to produce the pigment. Apparently, we had limits. In the 19th century, industrial chemistry created better blacks. Darker, cheaper, more consistent. No burning required. But we didn't abandon it because it was shocking. We just found darker voids. Some artists still swear only by the bone black today, for that specific warmth and softness you just can't get from a lab.